Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8, verse 36. This is Jesus speaking, and he says, "For what should it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Talking about perspective here, basically. And on one hand, you've got all the riches of the world, the earth itself, and on the other hand, you've got your soul. How does that balance thing work out? What should it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world? That's yours. You got it. You own it. You control it. You can use it, utilize it, spend it, whatever. Gain the whole world, but lose his own soul. Jesus is trying to make a point. Your soul is worth more than the entire world. Most of us haven't figured that out, but there it is. 1 Timothy chapter 6. First Timothy chapter 6. Verse 10. 1 Timothy 6:10. "For the love of money is the root of all evil." You've heard it said, I'm sure, 1,000 times in your lives that, money is the root of all evil. No, it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. That's why everybody is susceptible to this verse. Because I don't care if you're, Jeff Bezos, if you're Bill Gates, or, whoever you happen to be, or if you're some poor schmuck living in a cardboard box under a freeway overpass. We all love money to one extent or another. Some of us have it, some of us don't. So this is not an indictment on those who have money per se. It's not an indictment or a get off the hook for those who don't have money per se. Just because you don't have a lot of money doesn't mean that this verse doesn't apply to you. Just because you do have a lot of money doesn't mean you're necessarily hammered by this verse. The emphasis of this verse is the love of money. So that encapsulates poor people who will do anything to get money, or rich people who already have the money, but they don't want to lose it, they don't want to give it up because they love it so much. So everybody is wrapped up in this verse. So we're basically talking about money today. What should it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And for the love of money, that's the root of all evil. Not money in and of itself. It's the love of money. Do you realize that in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that Jesus spoke more about money than he did about heaven and hell combined? You would think, hey, he's a preacher, he's a teacher, he's trying to get people into heaven. You'd think that there's a ton of verses on that, and there are. You'd think that by virtue of being a preacher or rabbi, teacher, and so forth, that he wouldn't want people to go to hell. So there's a lot of verses on that, and there are. But if you take all the verses about heaven and all the verses about hell, put them together, he talks about money more than all those others combined. And there's a very, very practical reason for that. Number one, you as a Christian you're going to go to heaven at some point. And so he's got X number of verses that have to do with heaven. If you're a person who's on their way to hell, there's X number of verses that have to do with hell. But everybody, whether you're a Christian on your way to heaven, or if you're lost and on your way to hell, there's one common denominator that we all are involved in this world, and that is money, or the lack thereof, or the pursuit of, or the attainment of, or the wanting of. We are all consumed, to a certain extent or another, on the acquisition or the retention of money. It just seems like it's hardwired into us. Jesus spoke in hyperbole, which is a form of speech which uses exaggeration. For instance, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000,000 times. Well, no, I didn't really tell you 1,000,000 times. Maybe I told you 10 times or 20 times. But we use hyperbole for exaggeration to make a point. Kid comes to the parents. They want to go to they've heard that there's a party someplace. They want to go to the party. But Mom, Dad, everybody's going. No, not everybody's going. There might be 10, 20, 30 kids going, but not everybody's going. So we speak in hyperbole. Jesus did it all the time. When he talks about it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to go into heaven, that's hyperbole. I don't care how you squeeze it, a camel cannot go through the eye of a needle. And he knew that. He's not that stupid, but he's trying to make a point. And so you use exaggeration to make the point. So out of the 39 parables that Jesus spoke of, 11 of them had to do with money. Incredible, because everybody, whether you're saved, whether you're lost, whether you're someplace in between, whatever that might be, we are all consumed with the concept of money. In the Gospel of Luke, for instance, out of every 7 verses, one of them has to do with money. The Bible makes a big deal about money. It is probably one of the biggest single subjects in this book. Because your attitude about money reveals a whole lot about your character, about where your goals or your life or your love is. It reveals a whole bunch about you, just your attitude about money. So why this fixation? Why are we so obsessed? And some of us, admittedly, more so than others. Others can, some can take money with a grain of salt. Well, they've got enough for, their living expenses. They've got enough food. They got enough clothes. I mean, how many pairs of pants can you wear at one time? How many meals can you eat in a day? Now we get down to the finer things. Well, do you want a $29 pair of pants, or do you want a $6,000 pair of pants? Do you want to pay $15 for a meal, or do you want to pay $500 for a meal? Then we get into the little nitpicky things like that. But for all practical purposes, you can only spend realistically so much money on your needs or your comfort needs. Other than that, now it's goof-off time. So why do we have this fixation? Well, with some folks, it's a yardstick of success. One of the first things we do when we meet somebody new, what do you do? What's your job? And in that little sentence, we're trying to gauge where you are. One says, well, I'm a janitor. The other says, well, I'm a lawyer. Well, immediately, we've got it pegged on a pecking order as to who's making the most money there. And so if you're the lawyer and you're looking down on the janitor, maybe it's not a superiority thing, but it's still, I'm up here and he's down here. And vice versa. Ooh, I'm a janitor, but ooh, you're a lawyer. Well, some people are very, very happy to be janitors. I've done janitorial thing for years and years and years. Every church I was ever affiliated with in some capacity, I did janitorial work. Never bothered me at all. I was happy to do it. But some people, ooh, no, I'm better than being a janitor. I'm better than this, better than that. So one of the first things we do, what do you do? And then in our mind, some of us don't have the gall or the gumption to say it, but the next question in our mind is, how much do you make? This is why employers try to make it an ironclad rule that you don't tell anybody else what you're making in the company. And there's a practical reason for that. And that is that in your mind, you're looking at doofus over here goofing off, and if you know that he's making more money than you, that are doing a bang-up job over here, and you're not making nearly as much as he, now we've got discontent in the office. Now we've got a rivalry in the office. Now we've got problems. Because it all comes down to self. So that's why management, as a rule, tries to keep it quiet. Who makes what? Because all we're doing, we're eyeballing each other up. Oh, they leave early. Oh, they don't do their job good enough. Oh, they're relying on me to do it for them, so that makes them look good. This whole thing about money, it seeps into every aspect of our lives. To some people, money is a scorecard for their ego. Well, I made $150,000 last year. How much did you make? Well, I only made $75,000. Well, already we've got a pecking order going on here. We've got an ego stroke going on here. So the guy who makes $150,000 talking to the guy who made $75,000, he feels really, really good about himself until he runs into the guy that made $450,000 that year. And now the apple cart's all screwed up again. So we're always in that transitional thing that nobody's ever content, nobody's ever happy, nobody's ever satisfied, because we're so busy comparing ourselves with everybody else. Another reason we're so fixated on money, that for some of us, it represents security. And when you get to a certain age where you can't really effectively work in the workplace anymore to get more money, then that money that you do have, now it becomes, it's everything now. If we busted out today, me and my wife, and woke up tomorrow and found out that we've been scammed on one of these money type things, and somebody stole all of our money, what do we do now? I can't go back and get a regular job as such, an 8-hour-a-day grind. She definitely can't. And so for us, that money that we have, it represents security. For some people, it represents fun. Well, I've got, mortgage is paid, cars are taken care of, got food on the table, got clothes. Now what do we spend? Oh, I know. Well, let's go to Magic Mountain today. Let's go to Venice tomorrow. Let's do this. Let's do that. It represents fun. So for different people, depending on where you are, money represents different things. We all go about the acquisition of money in different ways. We all have a different fixation on money as to what money means for us. I know some people who they couldn't care less. As long as they've got a place to live, clothes on their back, and food in their belly, they're happy, they're content. And I know other people, they've got, $5 million homes. Their kids are going to, Harvard or Yale or whatever it happens to be. They've got more money in the bank than they can realistically spend in the rest of their lives, and yet they're absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. This is the Sermon on the Mount. I said earlier that Jesus spoke more about money than he did heaven and hell combined. There's one other thing that he did speak more of than even money. And that is the concept of the kingdom of God. I always talked about the kingdom of God. That was number 1. Number 2 is money. And number 3 and 4 would be heaven and hell. Attitude is everything. That's why in Timothy, Paul did not say money is the root of all evil. Money is an inanimate object. It just sits there. It's a tool. You use it to buy things. That's it. In and of itself, it's not good. It's not bad. It's just nothing. It's a medium of exchange. But what Paul is concerned about and what Jesus is concerned about is our reaction or our fixation or our love of that money. That's what separates the men from the boys here. That's why it becomes critical. It's your attitude about money. What are you trusting in? Let's say, you're a Christian. You're going through life. You go through various stages. Some people are Christians at a young age. Some people they become Christians at, in middle age, and some people, very few, become Christians at an older age. But let's say you're a young person in your teens or early 20s, and you become a Christian. At that point in your life, the concept of God taking care of you as such, it doesn't really factor in. It's like young people do not fixate on death. They do not fixate on seeing themselves, laid up with, heart attacks and strokes and, all the other stuff. We're just not hardwired like that. So you as a young person, what are you trusting in? You've got a 30-year plan. And at the end of that 30-year plan, you're going to retire. You're going to, enjoy yourself. You're going to travel. You're going to just sleep in late and goof off and do whatever you want to do. But when you're a young person, What is your plan to get there? Well, you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to save. You're going to have to be sharp about what you do. But you don't generally worry about not being able to do it. As I mentioned before, I'm at that tail end of my life thing. I'm not worried at this point how I'm going to make the money, how I'm going to get the money. At this stage of my life, you worry about, am I going to be able to keep my money? Is somebody going to put a scam on me? Am I going to lose it somehow? So depending on where you are on this spectrum of life, your attitude of money is different in certain respects. What do you trust to get you through? At the end of the day, you've got a mind, you've been trained, maybe you went to school, maybe you graduated with, degrees in this and degrees in that. You've got work experience. You've got assets that you can sell in the workplace. You've got expertise that people want and people can use, and they will pay you to utilize that expertise. What are you trusting in at the end of the day? Your expertise? Or does God somehow figure and factor in on this thing? In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is praying one day. His disciples see him pray, and they said, Lord, teach us how to pray. Verse 11, or verse 9, he says, after this manner, therefore pray ye. And you know how the rest of it goes. Our Father which in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Now that's the religious aspect of the prayer. He's honoring God, he's acknowledging God, he's addressing God as such. Now the first part that is a human element in this prayer that has to do with you and I comes in verse 11. The first one, after he's acknowledged God, he says, give us this day our daily bread. That's a me too type prayer. That's me. This is not anything to do with God in that sense. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Okay, that's God's side. But for me now, on a personal level, give us this day our daily bread. You know how he phrased it? He's very precise in what he's trying to say. He's not loosey-goosey. He's not speaking hyperbole here, and I'm not saying that hyperbole is a bad thing. It's a very, very effective thing, I think. I use it all the time. See, right there. I use it all the time. I don't really use it all the time, but you say that in order to make the emphasis. Give us this day our daily bread. He says, you don't pray. I'm reading between the lines, obviously, here. You don't pray, Lord, let me win the lottery today so that I don't have to bother you with my daily needs for the next 500 years. Who wouldn't want to win the lottery? You see these figures and stuff. Oh, yeah, the California thing's up to, $600 million. The Florida one, $600 million. New York one. Who wouldn't want to win these things? So now you're secure for the rest of your life. Your kids are secure for the rest of their lives. Your grandkids are secure for the rest of their lives. If you got any brains and use it right. But emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, what does this do for you? It takes you off the hook from having to depend on God. And when I say depend on God, I don't mean that in the sense that God doesn't expect you to work. He does. You can't lay in bed, till 10 o'clock in the morning and, be up all night goofing off and so forth and expect God to take care of you. That's not how it works. But if any one of us were to win that $200, $300, $500, $600 million lottery, do you think the next day your prayer would be, give us this day our daily bread? No. So something happens inside when you are at that point that you don't need God on a daily basis. And he's not saying that we have to continually live on the brink of disaster. It all comes back to attitude. Attitude. Give us this day our daily bread. He didn't say you pray for the week's load or a year's load or a lifetime load. Sufficient unto the day thereof is evil. You've got enough problems in life just getting from point A to point B. You need God, but you need him every day. And if you got to a point that you don't need him financially, he's on the back burner. I mean, you can go through your own lives and just, you can see this and you'll bear it out every time. You'll go along, for instance, in good health, feeling good, kids are in great shape, finances are in great shape, marital relations are in great shape, wonderful. And you might go days or weeks or months and not have a real meaningful, deep relationship with God in prayer. Oh yeah, you might have the cursory, perfunctory, oh Lord, bless me here and bless them there, and that kind of thing. But I'm talking about the gut-wrenching, bawling, snot-flipping type of prayer where you're on your face before God and you say, God, I need this or I'm going to die. If you got $1 million in your pocket, you're probably not going to come to him on that kind of a basis. As soon as the marital problem comes up, what do? You go to God. As soon as one of your kids gets either hurt or find out they have a disease or find out, some catastrophic thing, you're going to go to God. If you lose your ability to make your livelihood, you can't work anymore, you go to God. You see the pattern here? We go to God when we need him. If we don't need him, we basically don't go to God. He knows that. He understands that that's the way we're hardwired. So he wants us on a daily basis to come and acknowledge him, spend time with him, have fellowship with him. And if the distractions of this world in the form of money come creeping in to the extent that we don't really need him anymore, we're the losers. He knows that life is a transitory thing. He sees the big picture. The little 70, 80 years that we're granted here in this world, from his perspective, that isn't even a hiccup. It's gone like that. But from our perspective, that's everything. We cannot contemplate a life after this. Oh yeah, we know we're going to go to heaven. We know we're going to live forever. We know we're going to, do this and do that. But that's all just an imagination thing from our sense of reality. We can't experientially understand that. I understand what it's like to wake up and have a pain in my back, that it hurts to walk from the bed into the bathroom. I understand what it feels like to be dizzy let's say, and start wobbling. I swear, when Steve got married that day, I really and truly thought for that whole 12, 13 minutes of that ceremony, I thought I was going to go down. I was so hyped. I was so nervous. I was dizzy. I was doing this. And all the time I was speaking, all the time that I was reading whatever I was doing, the instructions or whatever it happened to be, it was like my mind was on a dual phase here. One part of my brain was doing what I was doing, reading and so forth. The other part of my brain, and it was a 50-50 thing. I said, God, don't let me go down. Don't let me go down. Let me just keep standing. Please don't let me go down. It was that bad in me. God knows all these things about us. He knows our weaknesses. He knows that we're clay. He knows that we're just nothing in his sight. He gets it. But from our standpoint, this life, these pains, this exhilaration, this happiness, this contentment when we get a big paycheck or we get a bonus or a pat on the back, for us, this is life. The concept of heaven is future. We can't really get our heads wrapped around it. But God looks down and he sees the whole parade. From the little banner girls that are starting, to introduce the floats and so forth, to the little pooper scoopers at the back of the parade that are, scooping up the horse poop and so forth. He sees the whole thing. We don't. So he says, I'm trying to convey to you guys an eternal, not a little transitory little blip, that little 60, 70, 80-year period here. You're consumed with that. He says, I'm trying to get you to understand the big picture. Over here. Matthew chapter 6 again. Look in verse 19. Same sermon, same guy speaking, basically the same topic. Verse 19, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. And here's the important part. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You tell me what you love, and I know who you are. You tell me what turns you on in that respect. I know who you are. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Some people's treasure, I've got to have a new yacht. I've got to have a better house. I've got to have a second house. I've got to be able to take, 4 cruises a year. I've got to be able to do this. I've got to be able to do that. To them, that is life. It's validation on their hard work or their expertise or their cunningness or whatever it happens to be. Other people sit around and they wish that they had the 4 cruises a year. They wish they had the bigger house. They wish they had the newer car. It's the love of money, not money, the love of money, which is the root of all evil. So God says, see the whole parade. Don't fixate on this little span that we call life. There's an eternity coming later. This is a proving ground. This is a testing area. This is our school. This is where character is built. Lay not up treasures on earth. Does that mean you're not supposed to be practical and have a pension plan? Of course you are. Does that mean that you're not supposed to save and have money for a rainy day? Of course you are. But what he's trying to convey is that that should not be the sole motivation. Give us this day our daily bread. Come to God and acknowledge him every day for what he gives you. The ability to make that money, the health to maintain that ability to make that money, the mental acumen and expertise that you can put in effect that allows you to make that money. You go to him every day. You acknowledge him. You thank him. You don't get to a point you think, oh, I got this because I had a better degree, or I went to a better school, or I worked harder, or I was sharper, blah, blah, blah. No. It is God that gives you the ability to make money. Lastly, Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. Beginning at verse 11. This is Paul speaking. In Philippians 4:11, he says, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." Very few Christians, I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about Christians. Very few Christians have learned this verse. I am therewith to be content. Who's content? Very few people are content. We either want more for whatever reason, or some other factor that comes in. Verse 12, I know both how to be abased, as put down, suffer loss, whooped upside the head, whatever it had, just fill in the blank. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Paul spent half his time in prison. He spent half his time trying to heal from, whippings, stonings, beatings. Back in those days, imagine, you're whipped, 39 stripes with a cat of nine tails. Your back is lacerated. What are they going to do? Put a cold compress on it for you? Whoop-de-doo. What about the infection? What about the deterioration of the muscle or so forth? Or the connective tissue? I mean, what kind of physical shape was this guy in after going through 5 of these things? He was probably a walking cripple. So he knew how to be abased. He knew what it was to get hammered. He knew all these things. But he also knew what it felt like to abound. There was times on a ship where Jesus would come to him one night and talk to him face to face. He spent 3 years in the Arabian desert right after his conversion, that he sat at the feet of Jesus for 3 years, face to face. He knew how to abound. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. It all comes from God. We've all suffered bad setbacks, bad things that have happened to us. We've suffered loss, whether it be material, financial, emotional, whatever. We've all gone through it. God knows that we need it. But he also gives us the good times. We need those. And here's the point, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. So you have to fill in the blank on an individual basis as to what money means to you, what it means for you, your attitude about acquiring it, your attitude about keeping it, your attitude about using it, and so forth. It's all on an individual basis. We know it's easy for us to say, well, yeah, what did Jesus have to worry about money? I mean, good grief. He not only owns the earth, he owns the solar system, he owns the universe, he owns, just fill in the blank. So how can he relate to us? Well, very easy. He was born as one of us. He did live as one of us. And he died worse than 99.9999999% of us. He knows. He was subjected to things and bad stuff the likes of you and I can never even imagine. He knows. But he also knows. What should it profit a man if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And he also knows that the love of money is the root of all evil. First thing he told his disciples when they said, teach us how to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. Heavenly Father, money is a very, very hard thing to preach about. And you know, I go years and never really preach about money. It is a very, very personal thing to everyone that hears it. They all take it in a different way because we're all at different stages of our life when it comes to the concept or the love of or the need, just fill in the blank, of how money works in our lives. So it's a hard thing. It's a very, very personal thing. And I pray, Father, that you would give us the capacity to understand it from your standpoint. We get it from our standpoint, Lord. We've got this wired. We know that we want money. We know that we need money. We know that we like money. We know what money can get for us, what it can do for us, how to enjoy it, and so forth. We don't need any lessons in that. But we do need lessons on what happens when we lose the money, or we don't have the money, or we can't get the money. Does that mean God doesn't love us? Does that mean God's mad at us? Does that mean that we've screwed up in some way? And there's where everybody has to assess their own character and their own relationship, Father. We know where you stand on this thing. Help us to stand where you stand. Help us to have the same attitude that you had about money. Help us to realize that at the end of the day, it is not money in and of itself that is not good. It is the love of money. And we're all susceptible to that. Father, forgive us, bless us, and help us. In Jesus' name.